Hello, everyone. Welcome to Canaan STL Podcast, brought to you by Canaan Baptist Church, where we exist to connect you to what matters most, to God, to people, and to purpose. This is Pastor Daniel. Today, I'm joined by Pastor Nathan, so our worship pastor here. Nathan, good to have you on the podcast today.
It's a pleasure to be here. They're wonderful.
Great. Yeah. So, we're this summer, we're jumping around a lot on topics based on, a lot of people traveling with mission trips and SBC conventions and vacations. And so anyway, well, Nathan, you're here today and, a great timing for you to be on because something happened this past Sunday. It was the first time in a while. And what was that?
Well, there was a sighting, sir, a choir on stage.
A choir on stage.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it was very exciting. So I thought it was great. It was great. You had great participation. Looked like a lot of singers. And, man, they sounded fantastic. Loved the songs you did. So, I just want to talk about choir today. And, what are your thoughts on choir? What is kind of your philosophy of choir? And where do you see this thing going? So we want to kind of hear your thoughts on all of this. So first of all, how did you think it went from, you guys practiced about a month or so and got everybody together on Sunday nights. And then you had the big, display on July 3rd where we celebrated our nation's birthday. You started My Country 'Tis of Thee. Then they did He Can Hold Me Fast. So anyway, so how did you think it all went?
I was thrilled with just the smoothness of it, everyone's patience, willingness to be a part of it. For every person that was there, maybe there was a newer singer or a fresh singer, someone knocking the rust off as part of that group of singers you saw, there were experienced singers, folks that came in and sung at Canaan before. That helped a ton to have those folks feel welcome too. I was also struck by how flexible the choir was. Pretty much every idiom you could imagine a choir singing, they did in one service. They started out, like you said, with an a cappella tribute to our country, or My Country 'Tis of Thee, just voices. That was a risk for them, and they did it right off the bat. They had a couple of times where they were participating with the band and the frontline singers, and that was an adjustment for them, an adjustment for the band too, but a wonderful one that they were just, hey, we're here participating. We're here what we'd be doing in the congregation, another function. And then they had one with Miss Peggy on piano. She did great, and that's another thing we remember, choir and piano. That's a classic thing. And then one where they were off stage having a flavor, and the band and the vocalists. There are times for that too. Really, everything it was a little eclectic bit of choir all in one service. I thought they did a great job. Very encouraged.
Well, good. Well, good deal. So, let's talk a little bit. Because we in our day and age, let me back up. Like when you and I were growing up, you grew up in the church like I did. It was choirs were a mainstay. Every church had choir, unless you're like, even Church of Christ, because the whole church is the choir there. But, everyone had a choir. And now it seems like the trends are kind of getting away from, choir. So could you talk a little bit about the trend, maybe why that is, and then what your personal philosophy is? Because obviously you see a place for choir. You wouldn't have tried to start it back up a little bit. So talk to me about, your observations on why does it seem like in church life, choirs are kind of fading out to a certain extent, and why that is, and then why do you see the need to try to bring some level of choir back here at Canaan? Mm-hmm. So if you talk to us about that a little bit.
Navy blue and light blue. That was the color scheme of the choir robes I remember from my church growing up. Do you remember your color scheme?
Where's he going with navy blue? What in the world?
Yes, ladies named Polly and Esther. Those robes were precious. Do you remember the color of your choir robes at the church you grew up in?
Absolutely, maroon with white collars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. These are iconic. These wonderful memories of these robes. Yes.
I don't know if they're wonderful, but they're memories.
Yeah. They didn't breathe too much, but they were wonderful. Great uniformity. I got my shot in a church that let a little 7th grade trumpet player participate in a church orchestra. So I was not in the choir growing up. Again, I was a band nerd growing up. I don't feel like I was cool enough to hang out at the choir table growing up, whether in school or church, but I was next to the choir and got to see them and memories of those robes and then singing and me kind of toot my own horn along with them to do that. Such a precious memory. It's so built into church culture and this era, good, wonderful memories. I remember when there was a church remodel, and there were new robes for the choir when the choir went without robes. But yes, there has been a trend of late to where the choir has been diminished or looks different, or just some little permutations. The big sign of this is in scrambling with this choir that had a month of rehearsal. They did great, but it's a quick turnaround. Mm-hmm. I called up Lifeway for one of the selections we were doing. He Will Hold Me Fast, which is a song that you'd suggested, really great congregational song that we're going to keep working with, see how folks do singing along with it. Called up Lifeway for an arrangement of it. And they said they are now print on demand. And that wasn't always the case. I remember getting choir testing kits where they'd have Easter coming and they'd have single copies and you could just order them in bulk and it was as easy as could be. Now, when I called them, ordered a bunch, needed a few more because there was more interest. That's great. They said, okay, it'll be 10 to 14 days because we have to print them. And that is really a sign of the times, sign of a change.
So what is that change and why?
Fewer churches having choir, having a choir on a regular basis, perhaps I should say. A difference in song structure, maybe more of a band leading arrangement, just more churches kind of choosing that, trending that way. You might see the same thing with organ, perhaps, and just as styles increase and decrease, and it's just hard to predict sometimes. Mm-hmm. There are still companies that offer them, but that has changed and ebbed and flowed with the industry. Mm-hmm. So good to still have access to that. But yes, and again, you'd asked what is that? What's my philosophy with it? And it's almost like you guided us through as a staff through a SWOT analysis earlier in the year. SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a great way to do that with the choir, and it has so many strengths. Just off the cuff. I mean, the choir can prompt the congregation to sing and be such a good example. And the choir was this past Sunday.
Yep, absolutely.
Vocal example setting. I mean, a weakness would be it takes a lot more rehearsal. You have to be a lot more intentional, maybe not quite as nimble. Mm-hmm. Opportunities, I mean, it could be a foot in the door for prospective vocalists. Yep. That's exciting from an analysis perspective for that with choir. I mean, a threat could be if folks felt obligated to do it in perpetuity, never stopping, always I've got to do choir and feeling obligated to it to the exclusion of other things. It may even robs from some other ministries important in Canaan's estimation. Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of things to analyze, but choir has this flavor and this power, and it's good to hear the great feedback that people it hit them differently, saying, okay, it's something, a different flavor, and made folks sit up, take notice, maybe even sing a little stronger, a little bit of a change. I was pleased to see the congregation really engaged last Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so there's definitely, we've seen a kind of a decline in the number of churches that are doing that. And there's probably a 1,000 reasons for that. I don't know, maybe but one or two out of the 1,000, right? But at the same time, it's a beautiful opportunity. Like you mentioned the SWOT analysis, the opportunity for people to serve and minister, to leverage their God-given talents for God's glory and to serve Him. I think the way that you kind of used the choir some this past Sunday to start service off, but also is like almost an extra instrument to bring in the background vocals. I think you had them doing some oohs and ahs at one point, one of the song. That was great, Oh, great. It enhanced the musicality of what we were singing to the Lord. And, so I thought that was fantastic. I thought it was really good. So what do you see the choir? Where do you see the choir at now? Where would you like to see it go?
I get a little nervous anytime I hear or get a sense that there's a have to as far as instrumentation or vocal things for people to feel like they can engage in sung worship at Canaan. Mm-hmm. I'd feel the same way if someone said we must have choir at all times, or it doesn't feel right. That triggers alarm bells in my head.
Yeah.
Same as if someone says we must always have drums or even guitar. As a guitarist, like, well, we can have a lot of guitar, but not always. It can go without. I like the stretching and the flexibility of that. Say, well, maybe you didn't grow up with a choir in church, but there was one this Sunday, and you saw him try to be nimble. We tried to use him in a flexible way in a lot of different ways. And was that an obstacle for you? If so, why? If not, well, that's a good thing. And we want to kind of keep it, flexible and versatile, and this musical expression to not feel like we're necessarily a slave to style, but we can change. I don't know if there are any killer accordion players at Canaan that I know of, but maybe I'll put the word out in this podcast. There's a use even for a rarely used accordion can be played well and makes people sit up and take notice. I hadn't thought about accordion on a Sunday morning. That's amazing. But choir has such a value enough to say, let's stretch ourselves today. Let's bring in a special choir. Let's do this and take advantage of the powerful testimony it can be. It's just so nice to have. I mean, there's this example. I was thinking through, Pastor. I was thinking like the heavenly host in Luke 2, the prophecy in Revelation chapter 9. There's such a bathing in Scripture of a choir. Now, it could be argued that's the congregation singing along, but the choir almost models that. We can see it happen. But what I would like to see is, Pastor, we saw this a little bit. Folks were willing to serve. Folks came in and they didn't know me. Maybe they hadn't worked with me before, and they said, well, I don't know, this guy looks a little suspicious, but let's try it. Let's sing. Let's warm up. Let's do some things.
You notice I wasn't singing in the choir.
No, you weren't singing. Yeah, this time. That's right. That's right. Yeah, but it was so nice. And by the end of it, they were just so gracious, and we were getting used to each other. I would love to see more of that, so that when the ask comes, maybe it's, Christmas time caroling, a bit of singing in a way that adds to it. Like you mentioned, the ooze on Is He Worthy, which I had missed. I love the ooze on Is He Worthy.
Yeah.
Or a statement that can be made more powerfully with the choir. I like seeing people willing to do that. So I'm hoping folks got over the weirdness of me. I got used to them and figuring out them, that it makes it easier to say, let's do it again. Let's try it again. Let's find the right opportunity for it. And when that comes along, there'll be less of a hurdle, a hill to climb, saying, all right, we got some momentum now. Choir, let's go back. Let's commit to a month like before, a little bit like before. That's okay. Let's come on out. Maybe I even convince the pastor to come out. Who knows what the future might hold.
Yeah, that's great. So what, not sure about the future, what it might hold. You mentioned the possibility of caroling or something else. So right now you still just kind of, what are you processing as far as what is a next step? What
I was struck by, and there were a lot of people there. There were also a couple that could not make it in the choir due to their other worthy and excellent obligations, including, in one sense, one prospective singer had to teach in a connection group, was an actual committed teacher. And I am, again, it's a lot to learn about Canaan. I really do not want to be someone who robs from Peter to pay the choir Paul.
Right. I
don't want to do that. So I do have a little bit of paranoia, a little bit of worry, still being a Canaan rookie. I don't want to do that. So I don't want to get into that place where it feels like it's something at the expense of the other. Canaan is so special. For example, its focus on missions, and its focus on teaching and discipleship. But I'm sure folks listening to the podcast could identify, well, maybe Canaan used to do a certain thing, a certain fundraiser, a certain ministry, and doesn't, because we've tried to identify the things that are great, even at the expense of some good stuff that has to go away or diminish. So I really want to make sure that the great things don't diminish, even as we try to put out the call for a choir sometime. I could see such usefulness for folks getting in the Christmas spirit. Yes, Christmas is a great time for choir possibilities. Songs like, well, what we just did for Independence Day, that's valuable too. A chance for folks to get their feet wet with singing and trying it as a first step. there's a lot of possibilities, but I do want to balance that. This is so great with doing right by Canaan and what the leadership has identified as a worthy pivot, especially after lockdowns, to what is the best use of our time and our volunteers' time to serve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really good. It's really good. Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. So, really interesting about choir. It's good stuff. So let's just kind of shift gears. You kind of brought this up, and I didn't prep you on this, so this is going to see how well you do at the spur of the moment. You mentioned you're still kind of a Canaan rookie, so you've been here since November, right? So what is that? 7 months, 6 months, something like that?
Yeah, it's been
a
glorious blur.
So what's your, what do you think? How's things going? How are you assimilating into things? How's your family doing? What at this point, what excites you about Canaan? That sort of thing. What just kind of share with the church family here who's listening. What's going on?
It has been remarkable and a joy. I think my family is so encouraged. Let's see. A couple weeks ago, we had in dear family. Actually, no, kind of family friends from West. They came across the state. We knew them back in KC, and they came in, and they came in largely for us. They took a little family vacation, but we never had that happen before. They traveled to see us in St. Louis in our new home, and we came. We saw the Science Center and the observatory, and it was just a wonderful experience. Kind of yet finding one of these St. Louis attractions we haven't seen yet, and there's so much to see. The church recommended so many spots, places to eat, places to go, things to do. We've been slowly kind of checking those off the list. I think the family's been encouraged. What it's done is overcome, I think, a lot of things that everyone's been struggling with, Canaan included. When I arrived, we're still kind of coming out of lockdowns, a lot of a weird church season, and a tough hiring season where you want to identify the right person for the job, and that is tricky. It's a tricky position to hire for. It's a tricky fit between worship pastor candidate and church. It's a tough thing. So once that happened, there's also an acclimation process. And, me getting through Christmas and Easter, having to learn quickly. Okay, there's a helicopter, and the helicopter is going to drop eggs. Here we go.
Right.
I have felt like the toughest challenge has been the learning curve and how quick that's been. And there have been times I'll beat myself up. Oh, I've got to get this thing fixed behind the scenes, this bit of organization, this bit of things that lapsed through the fault of no one because it's 2 years without someone in that staff role is massively difficult. And yet there's been such grace and such patience. People unfailingly, I'll self-flagellate. I'll talk to them. Oh man, I'm trying to catch up and all this. And they're so encouraging. Staff, congregation, volunteers, everybody has just been so welcoming that it's been a joy. Bright days ahead for us at Canaan. So excited for the future, for the fall, to have a start of a season at Canaan kind of established. But it's timing strange, coming out of COVID lockdown strange, but just mitigated completely by the character of Canaan and the wonderful opportunity to serve.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing all that. So you got a captive audience right now. So what would you like to see people step up in worship ministry, right? What opportunities do you have for people to serve? And what could or should or would they be doing? Like you mentioned an accordion player earlier. Is there other instruments out there you'd love to see employed, or what opportunities? I'm just the average listener, and as the local sports radio says, average Joe listener. If I'm average Joe and Jane listener right now, and may have some musical inclinations or maybe some not, but what's there for me to get plugged into?
Well, again, I'll kind of cite my newness has been a delay. I'll put out to people who had already maybe expressed some auditions, desire to sign up, a desire to serve. Stay tuned, because you're on my list, and I'll be getting in touch. Want to get an audition process really formalized, really done well and carefully. That is happening very soon. We want to be so careful and mindful about that in a church setting, because these are people's hearts.
Yeah.
They're not serving to do a gig on stage with karaoke or anything. This is music for arguably its highest purpose and
to exalt Jesus. That's right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So when people are expressing their desire to serve, it's like we've got to have a process implemented and set up and running and rolling to have them honored in that process. Hear their testimony, hear their desire to serve. Tell them a little bit about what Canaan's all about. Is this somewhere you want to serve?
Yeah.
And then hear their skills and all these things. Since that is just on the cusp, we had choir month, and choir got all my attention, and we got done with that as soon as they're sick of me. Now we pivot to auditions and all this. Getting that set up is going to be a big thing. But once that's there, it does enable so much. Once the structure of the iceberg under the surface of all these resources being available, where we could accommodate an orchestral instrument, I'd love to welcome folks to audition in that way. Maybe if they've even asked before, and maybe they've been said no, or not right now, or hold on. Getting folks involved is a different sort of thing when it's in the in-between than it can be now when I get my head on straight.
Yeah.
Saying, okay, now we're at an established place, so that cellist that's interested, we can come alongside that.
Oh, I'd love to have a cellist. That would be awesome.
I mean,
we've actually had one of our young ladies play the cello some before. And so
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, just wonderful. Well, we would welcome that in all sorts of different ways, but it is so. What I'll say is stay tuned. We'll be reaching out. We'll be kind of expressing interest on the music side. On the tech side, that is continually rolling. You'll start to see new faces at different tech stations. That's already going on.
Yep.
Kevin has been excellent in granularly training new sound operators and video operators and things like that. But for that, the audition process is coming soon. So y'all have been so patient, so get ready.
A lot of opportunities there. And as we launch Melville, there'll be even more opportunities. And so just a lot of good horizons coming toward our way. Great. Well, Pastor Nathan, we appreciate you and what you're doing. And it's been a fun 6-7 months already. Look forward to seeing what all the Lord has for us in the future in terms of worship. Well, if you have any questions or comments, send them our way at info@canaanstl.org. And we hope to see you this Sunday as we continue to worship the Lord, that we get to know, love, and serve. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time on Canaan STL Podcast.